Good morning, everyone. This morning, our guest musicians are ill and will not be with us. So Gary is going to give us a great time here this morning. His first piece is going to be Romance by Richard Rogers. Thank you, Gary. Whew, thank you. Our opening words, oh, you who are makers. Blessed are the makers. That's what this is called by Marcus Lifford. O you who are makers, makers of beauty, of paintings and pottery and sculpture, blessed is the making. You who make with hands and hearts and minds, who make out of breath and bones and blood human lives, blessed are the makers. Blessed are those who make us laugh, who make jokes, who make faces and toys. Blessed are those who make messes, who make trouble and friends when needed, make up. Blessed are those who make do, who make it last, make it work, make beds and make time for others. Blessed are those who make love, who make out and make more and make mistakes. Blessed are those who make coffee and tea, who make conversation, who make meaning in the face of tragedy, who make merriment and awaken joy. Blessed are those who make peace, for they shall inherit the earth. Our time for all ages is called What If by Samantha Berger. With pencil and paper, I write and draw art to create many stories that came from my heart. But what if that pencil one day disappeared? I'd fold up the paper till stories appeared. And what if that paper was no longer there? Well, I'd chisel the table and then carve the chair. And what if there wasn't a chair here at all? I'd chip and I'd peel at the paint on the wall. Okay. And what if there wasn't a wall anymore? I might build a story from boards in the floor. Without any floor, I could still use the land and sketch out a tale in the dirt with my hand. I could still shape the leaves. I could still sculpt the snow. I could still plant the flowers and make kingdoms grow. Without any land, I would still use the light, invent shadow stories the sun would ignite. If there was no light, I would still use my voice to sing out my stories, to chant and rejoice. I'd still have my body to twist and to bend, to dance out my stories beginning to end. If I had nothing, but still had my mind, pause for a second, there'd always be stories to seek and to find. I know of nothing but one bit of fate. As long as I live, I will always create. As long as I live, I will always create. Nothing can take away our imagination. The end. Good morning, friends and family again, I know. Welcome to the weekly service of Buckman Bridge Unitarian Church, or as we say, BBUUC. My name is Claudia Marshall, and I am your worship leader or guide, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. If you're here for the first time, take a breath. Unitarian Universalism is a different type of church experience. We don't have one source of inspiration. We honor many. We are a people of deeds, not creeds. We are a community of people with different beliefs, lifestyles, different stories. What holds us together is our covenant and our values that are printed on your order of service. I hope you got a name tag when you came in from the back so that when we have fellowship hour, that we can just really fellowship with you. If you've been visiting with us for a while and you're a little more curious to learn about our faith, we regularly offer Learn About Me classes. If you have questions, please feel free to ask any of our members, and they will try to answer them or point you to someone else. We don't have all the answers, but we'll try. At this time, please silence your electronic devices, and thank you for giving us your time in this sacred space. Would Chris Kynes come forward to illuminate our chalice? Our chalice illumination this morning comes from the Reverend Scott Taylor. In the soft light of this flame, may we see life anew. May the supposedly real seem less solid. May the inevitable reveal its carefully concealed cracks. It's all made of pieces and parts, friends of each of them, longing to be rearranged. Or maybe it's a story and the pen is in our hand. Thank you, Chris. As we remain seated, please open your order of service, and we will recite our congregational covenant, which is our promise to each other to live in beloved community. We covenant to engage one another with honesty, kindness, and respect, to value diversity, seek understanding of our differences, and practice gracious accountability with care, love, and empathy. We make these promises to those who are here and those yet to come, so that we may be a safe, welcoming, and beloved community of acceptance, learning, and transformation. At this time, let us rise in body and our spirit and sing our call to worship. This morning. No, yeah, remain standing. I'm sorry. I'm telling you, it's morning for me. Our hymn this morning is for Beauty of the Earth. Okay, and it's number 21. Okay, and our musicians. It's on 22. I'm sorry. Dear Weaver of Our Lives Design. Sorry. Oh. We make it possible. I come on Sunday feeling weary, having worn out the snooze button on my alarm clock. I come on Sunday feeling frightened, having seared my eyes reading the latest news. I come on Sunday feeling burdened, having fretted about my workday worries. But I leave Sunday service feeling refreshed, having been renewed by the spirit of love in the community that exists here. I leave Sunday service feeling whole, feeling lifted up by the words of righteous challenge. I leave Sunday service feeling energized, ready to continue our fight for peace and justice. This haven, this refuge, this place of worship and wonder exists because we make it so with our contributions, the gifts of our time, our skills, our food, our love, our laughter, and our money. Please join me in giving so that we may continue to have a place that fortifies and challenges us in these trying and troubled times. It's time to give. Whether you use the Breeze app or scan the QR code in order of service or give online or fill out an envelope in the gray hymnal, please touch the plate as it passes by to your neighbor and smile. Whatever you give is appreciated. Our offertory ushers this morning are Marilyn Jones and David Rullison. And after they pass the plate, we'll stand in body of spirit and sing hymn 123, Spirit of Life. Just want to introduce to you our speaker, really creative person, because teachers all have to be creative, and just give your attention today. Alyssa, the pulpit is yours.
Thank you, Claudia. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It is so nice to be with you this morning. I'd briefly like to introduce the sermon's author, Reverend Janet Parsons. Reverend Parsons is currently serving at the Gloucester Unitarian Universalist Church since 2015. She has a fundamental belief in the worth and dignity of all people, an unwavering commitment to social justice and a dedication to seeking common ground to end gun violence. You can read more about Reverend Parsons in your order of service. Her sermon is titled The Creative Spirit, and she begins with a reading from the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. And I just want to say that crafting a worship service is all about creativity. And you see, Gary, the way he plays the piano, you can just feel that creative spirit. I really think when things happen where you have guest musicians not showing up and the worship leader having to kind of figure things out last minute, I just feel it's very relevant to the sermon that we're going to hear today. All right. Author Elizabeth Gilbert writes, "One of the best descriptions I've ever heard of the phenomenon of ideas entering and exiting the human consciousness at whim comes from the wonderful American poet Ruth Stone." Gilbert continues, "I met Stone when she was nearly 90 years old, and she regaled me with stories about her extraordinary creative process. She told me that when she was a child growing up on a farm in rural Virginia, she would be out working in the fields when she would sometimes hear a poem coming toward her, hear it rushing across the landscape at her like a galloping horse. Whenever this happened, she knew exactly what she had to do next. She would, and I quote, run like hell toward the house, trying to stay ahead of the poem, hoping to get to a piece of paper and pencil fast enough to catch it. That way, when the poem reached her and passed through her, she would be able to grab it and take dictation, letting the words pour forth onto the page. Sometimes, however, she was too slow, and she couldn't get to the paper and pencil in time. At those instances, she could feel the poem rushing right through her body and out the other side. It would be in her for a moment, seeking a response, and then it would be gone before she could grasp it, galloping away across the earth, as she said, searching for another poet. But sometimes, and this is the wildest part, she would nearly miss the poem, but not quite. She would just barely catch it, she explained, by the tail, like grabbing a tiger. Then she would almost physically pull the poem back into her with one hand, even as she was taking dictation with the other. In these instances, the poem would appear on the page from the last word to the first, backward, but otherwise intact. That, my friends, is some freaky, old-timey, voodoo-style big magic right there. I believe in it, though. And that comes from Elizabeth Gilbert in Big Magic, pages 64 through 65. And now Reverend Parsons begins. I once had the good fortune to be present when someone was struck by a creative spirit, and I had the chance to watch it happen. I was participating in a prayer group at my home congregation. I had never done anything like this before, but I was finding at the time that I was becoming more open to matters of the Spirit, more curious. So here I was for the first time trying to explore prayer and its different forms, and frankly, working on figuring out who or what we might be praying to. In the session on this particular day, the group had been given time to write, to explore writing a prayer or a reflection, to see what might emerge. Suddenly, a friend next to me started writing as fast as he could. Something was almost visibly pouring out of him onto the paper. And as he scribbled, more and more of us noticed and began watching. At the end of the time, we were invited to share what we had written, and he read aloud his work. He titled it Horizons. And it began, "Surely it is one of the grandest illusions, that long, thin line where the earth appears to reach up and kiss the sky. People listened in amazement. And I remember another friend asking, "You mean you just wrote that now?" If this had never happened, Reverend Parsons says, I don't think I would have believed the story about the poet Ruth Stone that I read a few moments ago. I come from a long line of practical, logical folks who are pretty much just interested in the facts. I used to be one of them, and I never would have described myself as creative. My family tended to have a pretty limited definition of who could be considered creative. It involved famous artists and composers with names such as Rembrandt and Beethoven. So when a friend lent me Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic, Creative Living Beyond Fear, I found that it really expanded my view of creativity and who gets to call themselves creative. If you're alive, you're a creative person, asserted Gilbert. My word, I thought, that sets the bar low enough to include even me. What is so wonderful about this is that it gives someone like me, who never thought of herself as creative, a chance to look at herself in a new way. What Gilbert attempted to do is to give everyone permission to see their own creativity, to open up to possibilities, to step toward a life of curiosity, engagement, and courage. Elizabeth Gilbert, the author of the bestseller Eat, Pray, Love, has some very different ideas about the nature of creativity. She believes that our world is inhabited not only by beings, but by ideas. She believes that ideas are alive, that they have a conscious will, and that they actively seek a human collaborator in order to enable themselves to come to fruition. Creativity to her is a form of enchantment, something magical, mystical, and supernatural. I bet you don't hear something like that every day. I would not have believed this idea for a second if I hadn't witnessed for myself someone sitting next to me suddenly just seized by some kind of creative force. But as I read the book and sat with Elizabeth Gilbert's ideas, I thought more about these notions that seem so otherworldly, so illogical. I started to remember times when it seemed that perhaps a channel had opened for me, a door, allowing something to emerge. I remembered waking up very early one morning as a young girl, watching the sunrise and writing a poem about it. I remembered snowshoeing a few years ago and meditating on color. How many shades of white and blue and gray could I identify in the shadows on the snow? When did one color shade entirely into something else? I remember how connected I felt, how aware, how completely engaged with my surroundings as I studied colors and shadows and angles of sunlight. Perhaps there is something to all of this. Perhaps I am a creative person, but I just hadn't noticed. Maybe I didn't have permission to notice. Perhaps I haven't known how to be open to the force that can emerge when I make room for it. Perhaps I have been confusing creativity with talent and not seeing the many ways that the creative spirit is a work in my life. What Gilbert helps us to see is how deeply spiritual a creative life is. In fact, there is no way to separate creativity and spirituality. Creativity, the creative spirit, is what encourages people to grow, to find out more about themselves and the world, to be curious, to take risks, to love yourself and your work. The creative spirit is calling to us, hoping we will hear it, open to it, and respond. It nurtures and develops our souls. This is the very essence of spirituality. What can separate us from a life of creativity isn't a lack of talent, whether we see ourselves or others sees us as talented, no. What can separate us from a life of creativity is our response to the invitation, to the call. Do we say yes when we feel something inspire us? Do we even notice? Do we walk through the door that opens, or do we say no, or I can't? To respond to the creative spirit, to notice when it is active, and to say yes requires courage and faith. It also requires hard work. There is an inherent paradox in creativity. We heard in our reading and in my story about those times when a swirl of ideas just found someone seemingly naturally, without the person having to do much except hold a pencil. And yet, many of you know, I'm sure, that our response might begin with saying yes to the Spirit, but our response also requires hard work to make room for it, to nurture it. We grab the pencil and hold on, but paradoxically, we also have to keep learning and growing. Elizabeth Gilbert urges us to not quit our day jobs. Work and creativity are not separate. There is a perseverance involved in a creative life. There is commitment to not wait until you have extra time, commitment to arrange your life to make room for your creative spirit. We have to commit to weave the spirit, the ephemeral with the mundane. We commit to balance, to honor all the conflicting needs and wants that human life demands of us. But if we are committed to that weaving, that balance, we can live a life of spirit or creativity. Gilbert suggests that we treat our creativity like a lover. When we fall in love, we make the time. We are willing to sacrifice. I had never heard of the poet Ruth Stone, and so I did some reading about her. She had a difficult life. Following the suicide of her second husband, she raised 3 daughters alone, cobbling together a life as a visiting instructor at a number of colleges and universities. But throughout her long life, the poems continued to gallop across the fields to find her. "Never keep a poem waiting," she told an interviewer once. "It might be a really good one, and if you don't get it down, it's lost." Ruth Stone finally gained tenure at a university in 1990 at the age of 75, and she was awarded the National Book Award at the age of 87. "Poetry coursed through her life," she said in her acceptance speech at the National Book Award ceremony, "like a constant verbal stream heard above the thrum and buzz of everyday existence." Quote, "It just talked to me and I wrote it down," she said, "so I can't even take much credit for it," end quote. And that comes from Ruth Stone, a poet celebrated late in life, dies at 96 by William Grimes, New York Times, November 24th, 2011. Ruth made it sound so simple. But when we look at the details of her life, we see that it was anything but simple. It took her all of her long lifetime to be considered successful. There was the perseverance over 96 years of finding ways to create space, to listen to the stream of poems, to keep saying yes to the creative spirit that was so present for her throughout her days. The creative life is not about easy success. It's about making room, allowing for possibilities, bringing forth that with which is within us. It's about nurturing our souls. It's about finding ways to live into the fullness of our lives, expressing ourselves, knowing ourselves, and allowing others to know us more completely. It's about wholeness and integrity, about trust, and about courage. All of these traits are examples of the fruits of the spiritual life. Without developing them, we cannot be whole. Deep within this concept of a creative spirit lies a paradox, and Elizabeth Gilbert describes it this way. Creativity is sacred, and it is not sacred. What we make matters enormously, and it doesn't matter at all. We toil alone, and we are accompanied by spirits. We are terrified, and we are brave. Art is a crushing chore and a wonderful privilege. Only when we are at our most playful can divinity finally get serious with us. Make space for all of these paradoxes to be equally true inside your soul, and I promise you can make anything. She continued. So please calm down now and get back to work, okay? The treasures that are hidden inside you are hoping you will say yes. Reverend Parsons ends by saying, my hope for all of you today is that you will hear the permission to open yourselves to the life of spirit, a life of creativity, wherever it comes from, wherever it might take you. May you continue to say yes and to bring forth whatever is within you. May it be so. Blessed be. Thank you.
If our musicians will come forward, our singers. Our final hymn is for Beauty of the Earth, number 21. And we'll sing all 4 verses. Please rise. And now, will Chris please return to extinguish our chalice? Our closing comes from the Reverend Barbara Wells, The Blessings of Creativity. May you find the deep peace of creation flowing in your spirit. May your senses awake to the creative spark that lives in you. May you walk in beauty and seek to create beauty wherever you go. May you take the risk of discovering the divine within you and around you, and may the Spirit of life bless you with courage and hope as you live creatively with others by your side. Blessed be.